Discover the incredible journey of Enzo Ferrari, the rejected boy who changed racing forever. Enzo Ferrari stood at the edge of the village, his heart racing like the cars he adored. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets that still bore the scars of war. He felt the vibrations of engines in his bones, the whir of speed whispering sweet promises of freedom. But behind that calling lay the weight of his family's struggles, a father, worn down by toil and loss, teaching him that hard work was the only path to survival. Enzo's dreams flickered like candlelight against the darkness of poverty and societal divide, where the affluent elite kept their distance, ignoring those like him, the working-class boys with grease-stained hands. Dinner time brought echoes of laughter laced with sorrow, the aroma of simple pasta filling the air. His parents shared tales of resilience, each word a reminder of their hardships. Yet, amidst the familiar warmth, Enzo's heart ached with a pang of yearning. He wanted more, a place on the racetrack, soaring past the elite, letting the dust swirl behind him like a banner, declaring his rise against the odds. But every time he approached the famed racing teams, he was met with rejection, their doors slamming shut in his face. Each failure wrapped around him, tighter than a mechanic's grip on a wrench. Then tragedy struck. A call, a frantic rush, and he learned that his best friend had been killed in a race. That moment shattered Enzo's world. He felt the air rush from his lungs, the pain striking deeper than any rejection he'd faced. This loss ignited a fierce determination in him. He would honor his friend's memory by creating something that mattered, not just a racing team, but a legacy, challenging the status quo that poisoned his dreams. With barely enough money, he founded his own team, knowing full well the shadow of financial threats lurked behind every corner. The whispers of naysayers stung, suggesting failure was inevitable. But when he thought of his family, their love, their endless support, he steeled himself for the battles ahead. As the day of the race drew closer, Enzo faced a shift. Admiration from those who once overlooked him began to ripple through the crowd. It was thrilling yet suffocating. Would these elites, whose approval he once sought, stand behind him or abandon him when it counted? His heart pounded with every new whisper. He could almost hear the expectations tightening around him like a straitjacket. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Enzo prepared for the race of his life, the air hung heavy with anticipation. The crowd hushed, a silent wave of energy buzzing through the stands. He could feel the eyes of the elite, the forgotten whispers of those who had rejected him. Would he be more than just a boy from a small village? The track ahead stretched infinitely, filled with both promise and the threat of potential destruction. Was he ready to confront his deepest fears and soar beyond the chains of expectation? The engines roared, and as Enzo took his place behind the wheel, he knew that this moment would define not just him, but the legacy of all who dared to dream like him. With a deep breath, he prepared to launch into the unknown, uncertainty swirling around him like the dust on the racetrack. Would he emerge victorious, or could this plunge into high-octane hell be his last? Enzo's heart thudded like the engines revving all around him. He could taste the gasoline in the air, a stark reminder that his dreams and fears occupied the same terrifying space. He glanced to his left, seeing seasoned racers in their sleek machines, the epitome of success and skill. Each driver was a name, a legacy. And here he was, a boy with nothing but a makeshift team and a heart full of hope. The signal lights flickered, and his palms turned sweaty against the steering wheel. Enzo inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with determination. He could hear the crowd, a swell of cheers and boos, a chorus reflecting the turmoil inside him. Some rooted for the underdog, others for the familiar champions. As the last light turned from red to green, a surge of adrenaline propelled Enzo forward. He felt the roar of the engine beneath him, the vibrations pulsing through his body as he pressed the accelerator. The track blurred into a whirlwind of colors, the scenery flying past him in a race against time. But it wasn't just a race against his competitors. It was a battle with himself. Every inch he gained, every turn he took, felt like a strike against those who had doubted him. The voices of rejection echoed in his mind, yet they fueled him, pushing him to drive faster, harder. As he rounded the first curve, Enzo narrowly avoided a collision with another racer, his heart racing even faster. The rush of near disaster left him exhilarated yet shaken. He realized that this was more than just speed, it was about control. If he could master that fear, he could master the race. He glanced at the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of the competition, those who were once untouchable. They tailgate him, just waiting for him to falter. Each time Enzo's heart skipped a beat, he reminded himself failure is not an option. With grit sewn into the fabric of his ambition, he kept them in sight but refused to let them intimidate him. The laps faded into one another, the world blurring with every turn. Enzo's focus sharpened, steering his thoughts away from the crowd and back to the track. He felt the roar of the engine beneath him, each rev a heartbeat for those who believed in him. Gigi, his best friend, was the reason he was here, and he could almost hear him urging him on. Don't quit, Enzo. Race for US.as. He entered the final stretch. Enzo was in the lead. The roar of the crowd rose to a fever pitch, the cheers mixing with the sound of the engines. His heart was pounding, but inside, he felt a profound calm wash over him. This was at the moment he dreamed of, conjured in the shadows of rejection and grief. Yet from the corner of his eye, he saw a rival pulling up beside him, desperate to edge him out. The finish line loomed ahead, a shimmering promise of hope, but he wasn't done yet. With a surge of willpower, Enzo pushed the pedal down further, the engine responding with a growl. Could he hold his ground and face this challenge head-on? The finish line neared. The world narrowed to that single point of victory. Would he cross it first and realize his dreams, or would he fall short when it mattered most? Enzo clenched his jaw, every ounce of his being channeling into this final push. As they crossed the finish line, Enzo's heart leapt. But before he could even process if he had won, something unexpected happened. A burst of chaos erupted from behind. Was that a crash? A sudden danger was drawing near. Enzo's breath seemed suspended as the world around him erupted. A cacophony of metal crunching, tires screeching, and the gasps of a stunned crowd filled the air. The moment he thought he had triumphed turned into a surreal nightmare. One glance in the rearview mirror confirmed his worst fears. A car was spinning out of control, colliding with another racer, sending debris flying everywhere. His heart raced as panic set in. Instinctively, Enzo slowed down, narrowly avoiding the chaos, even as adrenaline pulsed through his veins. The crowd's excitement morphed into horror, their cheers turning into shrieks of shock. He couldn't focus on the race anymore. All that mattered was safety. His eyes scanned the track, landing on the wrecked cars and the frantic movements of crew members rushing to assist. The smell of burnt rubber mixed with the acrid scent of gasoline flooded his senses. This wasn't just a race anymore. People could be hurt. In that dizzying moment, memories flooded back. Gigi, his best friend, who always believed in him, would be urging him to help, to do something beyond racing. Enzo took a deep breath, his heart still racing, but now not just from the thrill of competition. As officials waved the yellow flag, signaling caution, he knew he had to act. This was more than a chance to prove himself. It was a chance to show true character. He pulled to a stop on the side of the track, the engine rumbling softly as he hopped out of the car. The roar of the race faded into the background, replaced by the desperate cries of the injured. Enzo sprinted towards the wrecks, the surrounding journalists and spectators watching him with a mixture of confusion and admiration. "Get back!" an official shouted as the smoke began to billow. But Enzo's feet felt anchored to the ground. He couldn't just stand by. His heart guided him. He needed to help. As he reached a car pinned against the barrier, he saw a driver, trapped and dazed. The fear in their eyes mirrored his own before the race. Enzo took a deep breath, placing his hands on the mangled door, Realizing this was the moment that would define him. "Hold on. I'm coming," he shouted. The urgency ignited something in him. He strained to push while shouting for help. Others began to gather, inspired by his determination. He might be an underdog on the track, but here he was just a guy trying to make a difference. Finally, with a collective effort, they pried the door open and pulled the driver free, exchanging terrified glances as they assessed the damage. The driver looked at Enzo with disbelief, gratitude lighting their features. But just when Enzo thought he had done something good, another scream broke the moment. A new crash echoed further down the track. The chaos was coming back. The tension thickened in the air as he turned to see more cars losing control. Could he help again? The weight of the decisions lay heavy on his shoulders. This race, this life-changing journey, was suddenly about more than wins and losses. It was about humanity, courage, and pushing through fear. What lay ahead could change everything for Enzo both on and off the track. Would he become more than just a racer that day? With the crowd watching, holding their breath, Enzo took a deep breath and prepared for what might come next. The noise exploded once more, a horrific symphony of crashing metal and cries. Enzo's heart thundered in his chest as he turned back to the track. There was no time to waste. He felt the urgency surging inside him, an instinct deeper than just racing. Lives hung in the balance. He dashed down the track, dodging pieces of wreckage and the frantic movements of officials and crew members. Each step sent a quiver of fear through him, but he couldn't turn back. The sight of another car careening near the crowd set his blood on fire. "Over here," he shouted, waving his arms to direct the medics rushing to the scene, their faces tense with focus and urgency. He caught sight of the newest wreck, a car flipped upside down, smoke rising like a signal of distress. A crowd was forming, but Enzo had no time for fear. Someone could be trapped again. He sprinted closer, barely noticing the crowd's eyes glued to him, a mix of confusion and awe reflected in their faces. For a moment, he felt like he was the star of the show. But being a hero wasn't something he'd ever envisioned for himself. When he reached the overturned car, his heart sank. He could see movement inside. There was someone trapped, panic painting their features. Enzo felt the weight of all eyes on him. This was no race. This was a desperate call for help. "Can you hear me?" he yelled, his voice cracking with urgency. "I'm here. We'll get you out. Please help," came the muffled voice from inside, shaky and terrified. Enzo's muscles tensed as he hoisted himself onto the hot metal, bracing his feet against the car. With the help of some nearby crew members, they rocked the car back and forth. An official rushed over, shouting, "We need to stabilize it first." Despite the urgency, Enzo felt a flash of doubt. What if they couldn't get the driver out in time? "Just a little more," he urged, adrenaline coursing through him. They heaved together, driven by sheer will and fear. Finally, the car tipped just enough and they managed to pry open the door. The driver slumped out, gasping for air, and Enzo felt a spark of triumph blaze in his chest. But as the medics reached for this latest casualty, another shout went up from somewhere beyond. A horrifying crash echoed once more, vibrations rolling through the ground. Enzo's heart sank again, the moment of relief slipping into dread. "This can't keep happening," he whispered to himself, feeling the energy of the crowd shift. Their initial shock was morphing into desperation. They needed him again. The next moments felt like eternity as he struggled with his emotions. He wasn't a trained hero. He was just a young racer caught in the chaos. Yet, something deep down ignited a fire inside him, a pull to keep going, to keep fighting against the odds. The roar of another spinning car shattered his thoughts, and Enzo made a decision. He turned to the crowd, determination etched on his face. "We need to move. Everyone stay back." Fueled by an unshakable resolve, he set off into the haze, ready to tackle whatever lay ahead. The stakes had never felt so real. Each moment pushed him closer to the edge, redefining what he thought he could truly stand for. What if this day turned out to be bigger than the race itself? With a fierce heart, he prepared to face the chaos once more. Would this be the turning point for Enzo, the moment he stepped fully into the role he was meant to play? Enzo's instincts kicked in as the sounds of chaos grew louder. This time, it was different. A wild squeal of tires mingled with the desperate cries of the crowd. Each sound gripped his heart. He couldn't shake off the heavy weight of fear that loomed over him. He pushed forward, ignoring the dread that wrapped around him like a cloak. Ahead, he spotted another car spinning out of control, heading straight for a group of unsuspecting spectators. Time slowed for a moment, and the world around him blurred. The screams were almost deafening. "Get back! Move!" he yelled, his voice breaking through the tumult. People began to scatter, but not fast enough. Enzo sprinted, urgency sparking a fierce energy within him. He could see their expressions: shock, disbelief, terror. He reached them just in time, barely yanking a small boy away from the edge moments before the car crashed onto the track, sending debris flying like shrapnel. The impact rocked the ground beneath them. Enzo's heart raced as he held the boy, shaking and wide-eyed, in his arms. "Are you okay?" he asked, forcing a calmness he didn't feel. The boy's tears mixed with fear, and Enzo's heart cracked a little more. "Mom," the child whimpered, eyes darting through the chaos. Enzo's gaze swept over the crowd. Anxiety surged as he darted and twisted amongst the throng of people. He saw parents clutching their children, a lady screaming for help, and the sight of another fallen driver struggling to stand. Time was slipping. "Stay here. I'll find her," he commanded the boy, though he felt uncertain. Adrenaline coursed through his veins as he wove through the crowd, scanning for familiar faces, recognizing fear above all. He caught sight of a woman near the wreckage, her shock-stricken eyes searching for someone. It was the child's mother. Without second thought, Enzo pushed into the mass of people. He reached her just as she fell to her knees, distraught. "My son! Where's my son?" she cried out, desperation lacing her words. "He is safe. I promise. I got him," Enzo shouted, his voice firm yet kind. Relief washed over her face, and in that moment, he felt a connection sparking a flicker of unity amidst the chaos. Thank you, she sobbed, and Enzo nodded, rushing to follow the trail of destruction that had unfolded. He climbed over remnants of metal and shattered glass, each step weighing heavy with the burden of responsibility. Shouts and cries echoed in his ears, mixing with the distant sirens, forming a chorus of despair as he reached the next overturned car. He found another figure trapped, bloodied yet breathing. With the sudden strength of determination, Enzo swallowed his fear and hollered for more help. "Over here. We need everyone." Together with some nearby men, they started to lift the wreck, but Enzo's mind raced with doubt and urgency. What if they couldn't reach this stranger in time? What if? But deep inside, a flicker of hope ignited. They worked in unison, and as they freed the driver, Enzo's heart soared, a momentary victory amidst the raging turmoil. Yet, in the back of his mind, a dark thought lingered. How many more were out there? The shadows of the day loomed large, reminding him this day might change everything for him, for the sport he loved. "Keep going. We're not done yet," he barked to the weary crowd, determination shining through even as fatigue tugged at him as he surveyed the wreckage around him. His heart beat faster. This wasn't just a race. It felt like a battle for lives, for hope, for humanity. Could he keep pushing through? Could he make a difference larger than racing? His answer came in his next breath. He would have to try. With the unfolding chaos still ahead, would Enzo discover the strength he never thought he had? Enzo pressed on, adrenaline fueling his every move. He maneuvered through the debris, his heart pounding like an engine ready to roar. Each crumbled piece of metal reminded him of the fragility of life, the sense of urgency echoing louder than the sirens blaring in the distance. "Keep moving. Keep helping," he called out, pushing more people into action. Others hesitated, still caught in shock, but he could muster little sympathy. When lives were at stake, emotions had to be set aside. He spotted a young woman, pinned beneath the wreckage of a car, her eyes wide with panic. "Help, please," she cried out, her voice breaking through the chaos like a beacon of desperation. Enzo's stomach twisted, and he felt the gravity of the situation weigh him down. "Stay calm. We're coming," he shouted back, an urgency in his tone. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning for help. He had worked with these people before, racing against them, but now they were all united for one purpose: to survive, to save. Enzo turned to the gathering crowd. "I need strong hands over here." His voice rang out, commanding. Shaky hands, familiar faces, started heading toward him. A small group formed, determination etched on their features. "On three. Ready? 1, 2, 3. They heaved together, lifting the twisted metal piece just enough to free the driver's pinned leg. She gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks as relief flooded her features. Thank you," she managed to whisper, her voice barely above a breath. He felt the rush of accomplishment bubble in his chest, urging him to keep going. But with every person they pulled from the wreckage, another urgency gnawed at him. How many were still trapped? The thought sent sharp jolts of fear through his body. Whereas the safety team? Someone yelled, frustration breaking through the collective determination. Enzo's heart sank. It was too quiet, too surreal. The silence that had fallen felt like a tempest, a calm before another storm. Over there. Enzo pointed towards a cluster of emergency responders who were still tending to the injured. They need help too. Let us guide them. But the words barely left his mouth when another sound ripped through the air, the unmistakable sound of more wheels losing control. The crowd gasped in unison, a collective intake of breath that nearly pulled the fabric of fear tighter. Get back. Move. Enzo's voice cut through the tension as he twisted around, scanning the track for the source of the threat. His heart pounded in his ears, competing with the crowd's rising panic. Just as he began to retreat, his eyes caught sight of another vehicle, a red blur speeding closer, weaving in and out of the chaos, out of control. No, not again. Move. Everyone now, he yelled, pushing bodies aside, his muscles straining as he forced people to react. Suddenly, he felt someone grab his arm. It was the young woman they had just rescued. What do we do? He didn't have time to respond. Without thinking, Enzo acted. He shoved her towards safety, shouting over the roar of the approaching car. Get behind something. Go. What if he couldn't save everyone? What if this was the tipping point? With steely determination, he locked his gaze on the runaway vehicle. The seconds felt like hours. He sought a way to avert disaster, to reach out and make a difference even against the odds. This moment would define him. Enzo felt the weight of every life, every heartbeat. He had to do something. But would he have the courage to confront the chaos coming his way? Just as he prepared to take action, the world around him seemed to explode into movement. How could he face this next challenge? And would he truly find the strength within? Enzo blinked as the red vehicle barreled ever closer, defying everything in its path. Time stretched thin, each second an eternity. Around him, chaos erupted. Cries filled the air, panic bubbling like a boiling pot. He had to remain focused. His eyes darted, searching for anything he could use to slow down the runaway car. The crowd was scattering, people fighting the instinct to freeze with fear. Yet some remained frozen, and all Enzo could think of were the lives that would be impacted by one tragic moment. Get moving, he shouted, but his voice almost vanished in the clamor. He spotted a heavy metal barricade nearby. If he could reach it, if he could just create some kind of barrier, perhaps. Hey. A rough but familiar voice pierced the noise. It was Mike, a fellow racer who often teased him but now stood resolute, finding his own courage amid the turmoil. What's the plan? We need to act fast. A barricade. Over there. Enzo pointed. Together they sprinted forward, dodging debris and pressing on despite the chaos swirling around them. Go, go! Mike shouted, and the adrenaline surged through Enzo. This was a team effort, something he had often dreamt of in his racing days. He grabbed the barricade's edge, lifting it with every ounce of strength he could muster. With a grunt, Mike joined him, and soon they were dragging the heavy metal towards the track. Enzo's muscles screamed, but it felt good. The rawness of battle ignited a fire in him, pushing him to keep going for the sake of those who could not. Suddenly, reality shattered. The screeching of tires pierced through the air, a sound far worse than any tense silence. Instinct took over. "We need to hurry," Enzo yelled, urgency electrifying his voice as they placed the barricade with trembling hands. He glanced up just in time to see the blur of red careening toward them. Closer, closer with a fierce urgency. Enzo shouted, "Down! Get down!" He hurled himself and Mike flat against the pavement, the thundering sound of the car just feet away. The vehicle hit the barricade with a deafening crash, metal screeching against metal. For a moment, everything seemed to explode around them, an almost surreal dance of debris, flashes of red, and the terrifying noise of the impact. Enzo felt the air knocked from his lungs as the shockwave reverberated through the ground. Dust filled the air, swirling like ghosts from a battlefield. As it settled, Enzo's heart raced in a new rhythm, disoriented but alive. Slowly, they pushed themselves up, their senses sharpening as they scanned for what had happened. The red car was crumpled against the barricade, steam billowing from beneath the hood. The driver, a young man with wild eyes, staggered out, stunned. The crowd erupted into a mixture of tentative relief and dread. Enzo's throat tightened. Was this moment truly done? Had they averted disaster, or was there still more to come? "Hey, are you all right?" he shouted to the driver, but the man only stared blankly, lost in shock. Enzo turned to Mike, who was still catching his breath beside him. "We did it, I think." The weight of relief mingled with disbelief swirled in his chest. But even as they stood in the aftermath, enveloped by the echoes of their actions, Enzo felt a tug at his gut. There were too many unanswered questions. What had they just experienced? Was it over? And in that moment of calm, an unsettling thought crashed into his mind. Time and fate didn't lie still. "Look!" A voice in the crowd broke the moment of shock. Enzo's heart sank again as he turned, spotting a second vehicle, a black SUV speeding toward them without control. The revelation hit like a punch, and dread pooled in his stomach. It wasn't done yet. Holding on to courage, he braced himself for round two. Would he find the resolve to face the chaos again? Or was this truly the tipping point? The black SUV roared toward them, its tires screaming against asphalt as it barreled into the scene. Enzo felt time warp again, his mind racing through what had just transpired. The panic within him twisted like a wild vine, constricting his thoughts. Mike, still recovering from the last trauma, turned to Enzo, wide-eyed and breathless. "What do we do?" Mike's voice quivered. Enzo could feel that fear slicing through him too, gnawing at his courage. "Get everyone back," Enzo shouted, urgency surging through him. He started waving his arms, trying to catch the attention of bystanders. He needed to command the space. The chaos that enveloped them just a moment ago felt small compared to the impending disaster. People began to react, a few sprinting away while others hesitated, caught in the allure of the spectacle unfolding before them. Enzo could hear the murmur of the crowd rising, a wave of astonishment cascading over each wary onlooker. Was he the only one who understood the horror racing toward them? "Help! We need help!" Enzo shouted, his voice attempting to cut through the din. Then, turning back toward the vehicle, dread seeped through him as he saw the driver's face, muffled anger and reckless resolve mirrored in the glare of the sun. "Enzo, we've got to move," Mike yelled, grabbing his arm, trying to pull him away, but Enzo felt glued to the spot. He couldn't just run. Not when a collision was imminent. They had faced one car barreling down on them together. Now they had to act as if fate was driving a second, exponentially more dangerous vehicle right into their lives. Over there, Enzo pointed toward a line of parked cars, a makeshift barrier but something that could potentially divert the SUV. In his gut, he felt a flicker of hope, a flint in a dry forest begging to be ignited with a determined grunt. They both sprinted toward the row of vehicles, urgency fueling every step, adrenaline surging to the surface. Other racers, faces pale with fear, rallied alongside them, realizing the gravity of the moment. They pulled on doors, pushing and shoving, stacking cars to create a blockade. But the SUV was closing in too fast. Enzo stole a glance over his shoulder. the vehicle's sleek black contours distorted by speed. "Keep going," he urged, spurred by a fire he didn't want to extinguish. He could hear the roar of the engine growing louder, haunting him. His heart raced against the rhythm of galloping hooves in his chest. With one last heave, they shoved the last car into position just as they felt the tremor of an impact. Metal met metal with a sickening crunch. The black SUV collided with their makeshift wall, a sickly shudder rippling through the body of the nearest vehicle. The impact sent a shockwave through Enzo, and he stumbled backward. Time slowed once more, and as he looked up, the dust kicked up by the crash began to settle. He stared at the twisted front end of the SUV, its driver, somehow miraculously unscathed, staring back eyes wide with disbelief. "What just happened?" Mike breathed, stepping closer, his voice barely a whisper beneath the lingering tension. For Enzo, the scene became a vivid painting, a portrait of survival against the onslaught of fate, captured in frozen moments of chaos and human determination. Suddenly, from behind them, a fragile cry pierced through the aftermath. A little girl, perhaps no older than 5, stood rooted in place, eyes glistening with confusion. Unbeknownst to her, danger had danced all around. Yet here she was, a symbol of innocence amidst the wreckage. "Enzo," Mike muttered, staring at the girl. The realization hit hard. They weren't just protecting themselves. It was about safeguarding the community, preserving something much larger than their immediate selves. With every ounce of his being, Enzo felt the gravity of choices surge within him. How could they protect the vulnerable when chaos threatened at every corner? Tension braided itself around them, the question echoing. They had triumphed twice, but was that enough? Would their moment of bravery mean anything if they didn't confront what lay ahead? Echoes of sirens began to fill the air, a distant promise of safety or an impending storm. But Enzo couldn't shake the gravity of what had just unfolded. It wasn't only about them anymore. It was about those innocent lives that depended on their next steps. As he met Mike's worried gaze, a new thought sparked within Enzo, a flicker of resolution igniting the uncertainty. What if the real battle was yet to come? With that question hanging in the air, Enzo squared his shoulders, ready to dive deeper into the chaos, determined to protect everything they had fought for. What would happen when the dust lifted for good? The air was heavy with tension, the dust from the crash mixing with the sounds of distant sirens and murmurs from the crowd. Enzo turned his gaze back to the little girl, afraid she might wander into danger. She looked lost, confusion etched across her features. "Come here," Enzo called, waving her over. Her small frame hesitated, eyes darting between him and the wreckage. He could see her fear mirrored in countless faces around them. Mike stepped forward, crouching to be at eye level with the child. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe. Just follow us," he reassured her, his voice gentle but urgent. There was something tender about the way he spoke, the kind of warmth that could cut through the chaos surrounding them. After what felt like an eternity, the girl took a step towards them and then another, slowly inching closer. Enzo felt a rush of relief. Each step she took felt significant, like she was crossing the invisible line from fear to safety. When she finally reached Mike, he scooped her up, cradling her like she was made of glass. "Where's your mom?" Enzo asked, scanning the crowd for any sign of a frantic parent. The girl blinked, her lower lip quivering. I don't know," she stammered, glancing behind her as if her mother might magically appear. A knot tightened in Enzo's stomach. They had to act quickly. Too many lives were at stake, and time was slipping away like sand through their fingers. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "Let us get her to a safe spot," Mike said, determination flickering in his eyes. "We can't just leave her here." Enzo nodded, leading the way through the gathering crowd. As they moved, he caught snippets of uneasy conversations. People were scared, uncertain about what would happen next. Would there be more chaos? More danger? They made their way to the sidelines, closer to a cluster of paramedics tending to the injured. The emergency lights painted surreal shades of red and blue across the asphalt, turning the world into something surreal. Enzo spotted a woman searching frantically, her hands gripping her hair. "Hey," he shouted, waving her down. "Is this your daughter?" The woman's eyes widened, a spark of hope igniting in her features. "Eva," she called, rushing toward them. The girl, Eva, squirmed in Mike's arms. "Mom!" She leaped into her mother's embrace, tears spilling down her cheeks. Enzo watched as the two held each other, the connection they shared stark in the aftermath of the chaos. Nearby, a group of onlookers gasped, murmuring about the terrible accident. They whispered about the SUV driver, how the collision could have been so much worse. Enzo's pulse quickened as he focused on the still-wrecked vehicle. It was a stark reminder of how fragile life could be. Suddenly, a loud voice broke through the droning sirens. "We need statements. Anyone who saw what happened, please step forward." A police officer waved a flashlight, cutting through the shadows that gathered too closely around them. A surge of anxiety washed over Enzo. They had just escaped the crushing pressure of the SUV, but now they faced the weight of accountability. What if the driver was reckless? What if they put themselves in more danger by confronting this storm head-on? "Enzo," Mike said, snapping him from his thoughts, "we can't just stand here. We need to tell them what happened." But what if Enzo began, uncertainty creeping back in. "No time for what-ifs. We have to protect people. We have to make sure this doesn't happen again," Mike replied firmly, his voice steady with resolve. Enzo took a deep breath, feeling every ounce of doubt peel away. The little girl was safe now, tucked away with her mother. But what about the rest? The rest of the community was still out there, innocence hanging in the balance of fate's unpredictable grasp. With purpose surging through him, Enzo nodded, steeling himself. They would have to face whatever came next together. But this was only the beginning. What lay ahead, what truths they might uncover could change everything. As he stepped forward, ready to confront the consequences of that harrowing moment, a chilling thought struck him. What if this was just the first act in a larger drama? One that would unearth secrets they were unprepared for. What if the danger wasn't truly over yet? As the dust settled from the chaos of the day, the atmosphere was thick with an urgency that felt electric. Enzo turned to Mike, both boys catching their breath but refusing to look away from the wreckage, from the lives they had just entwined themselves with. This day had become something bigger than racing. A community was in the balance, and they both knew dewy-eyed innocence like that of little Eva couldn't go unprotected. The sirens continued to wail, echoing around them, a reminder of the fragility of life and the severity of the situation. Nearby, the officers were poised to gather stories, to piece together the sequence of events, and Enzo felt a shiver of doubt creep in. What if they were blamed for adding fuel to the fire? But voices crowded him, pushing out the specters of fear. "Let us do this," Mike said, his eyes igniting with fierce determination. "We have to speak up." "Yeah, let us tell them what really happened," Enzo replied, clenching his fists. In that moment, he felt the spirit of Gigi beside him, a silent cheerleading urging him forward, pushing him beyond fear into action. The boys marched toward the officers, their hearts pounding in sync. Enzo took a deep breath, steadying himself outside the tempest. "Officer," he called, garnering the attention of a young cop, easily in his 20s, who eyed him warily. "What did you see?" the officer asked, pen poised above his notepad. He swallowed hard, flooding his mind with the moments that had unfolded, every racing heartbeat, every scream a narrative of courage against chaos. "When the first car crashed, we saw a driver trapped. I jumped out to help. There were kids I couldn't just watch." The words tumbled out, raw and honest, a rush of adrenaline sparking resolve. "We worked together to get people out, more cars were coming, and we saved a little girl." He gestured towards Mike, who filled in details, recounting their efforts to mitigate disaster amidst its unfolding. He felt the crowd surging behind them, the weight of shared experiences brewing a storm of solidarity. After moments that felt like eternity, the officer nodded, shocked admiration glinting in his eyes. "Thank you for stepping up. You both showed incredible bravery." With relief flooding through his veins, Enzo felt a warmth blooming in his chest. They hadn't just been racers today. They had been heroes. The air began to hum with a softer energy, respect replacing the earlier whispers of uncertainty. As the medics began to wrap things up, Eva and her mother approached Enzo and Mike, tears of thanks shining. "You saved my baby," the mother whispered, voice quaking with emotion. The simple acknowledgement made Enzo's heart swell here. In the midst of chaos, they had forged heroes from sparks of humanity. But the day was not done as a new figure approached the driver of the SUV, visibly shaken but unharmed. He staggered up, and something hesitated in the air, regret or defiance. "Enzo couldn't tell. I didn't mean for it to happen," the driver stammered. A confession more than an excuse. In that moment, instead of anger or rage, Enzo felt a flash of compassion. "It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters how we move forward now," he replied, his voice steadier than he felt. "What do you mean?" The driver looked confused. "We need to be better," Enzo urged, taking a step closer, energized by the moment. "You've got a chance to do better, to be better. We all do. This isn't just a race. It's a chance for change." The driver nodded slowly, realization mingling with shame, shifting something deep within. Around them, heads began to nod. The community, once brimming with shock, found its voice again. They began talking, sharing stories as the sun disappeared, dipping the world into rich hues of sunset. Enzo looked around, taking in the faces that once watched with skepticism. They were connected now, woven tightly with shared resilience. Maybe this was a turning point. Enzo felt the weight lift. This was the legacy he yearned for. Not just racing, but a family of support, of hope forged from turmoil. "Let us make this a story of growth together," he spoke, half the boy and half the man he wanted to become, a casting anchor into the uncertain. As cheers began to rise and voices filled the air, he turned to Mike, a radiant smile breaking free. "Best race yet," he said. "Best team," Mike replied, clapping Enzo on the shoulder as they joined the crowd. The community had transformed into a living, breathing testament to bravery and compassion. Enzo had come full circle, not just a boy from the village, but a man reaching beyond the track, leaving behind the burned rubber of yesterday, soaring towards a future that glimmered like the dawn. This was the moment, a leap from chaos to unity. In his heart, Enzo knew they had something real, something worth racing for. And with every heartbeat, he felt the race was just beginning. So what are you waiting for? You need to subscribe now to catch every exclusive story that inspires change. Leave a like now to fuel the algorithm and keep this amazing community thriving. Comment below with your thoughts about this incredible ending. Let's hear your emotional reactions. And don't wait not even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, we can elevate these stories and make a real impact.